Hello, America, and oh, hello, America, and welcome back to another great edition of Dream Up on KABF 88.3 FM in Little Rock, plus syndicated nationwide and streamed worldwide, where everyone has a story of how they achieved their dreams, from celebrities to experts to average Joes and Janes. I'm one of your three co-hosts, Carl, double portion Kozlowski, because I'm supersized and want a good double portion of the Lord's blessings. With me are my co-hosts.
I'm Ron, the mirthful married man Pearson. Carl, I think we're going to change your name, by the way. I think you're going to be Carl the Beast Kozlowski. How does that sound?
That sounds better. Yeah, the Beast.
Don't pay, don't take him out to lunch if you're paying, because the Beast will show up and eat. And unfortunately, we don't have Antonio. I can get you in Delgado today because for those of you who don't know, Antonio is an immigration lawyer. He's got a big immigration case that he's busy working on and wasn't able to make our show because of that. So filling in for him, we have
Big Ticket Todd Turner.
Big Ticket goes in the middle. So it's Todd, Big Ticket Turner. Why are you called Big Ticket, Todd?
I don't know. It's a nickname I got doing a radio broadcast for football, and it stuck, and it got me in the gate for free.
So a girl didn't give you that name?
Oh, trust me. No. I wish it had a better story, but it's just free high school football games. That's all I got.
There you go. All right.
All right.
Well, Todd and I are here in Dallas, and Carl, you're there in Little Rock, and Antonio can't make it from LA today. And sometimes I broadcast from LA, but hey, dream up, man. It's where everyone has a story. It's all how we all started. I started as a street performer. Have had a big career in show business. Carl, you go ahead.
Well, I'm a 25-year comic and reporter, and been a movie critic for a good chunk of that time on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. I won America's Funniest Reporter at the Laugh Factory. And our guest today, we forgot to mention, he's actually coming from LA. Legendary comedian named Tom DREESEN, who was Frank Sinatra's worldwide tour opener for decades. And he was also one of 4 comics ever called by David Letterman to be on his show every year throughout his entire late night TV career. So it's quite an honor to have
phenomenal. I've done hundreds of shows with Tom, one of the classiest guys in show business and an absolute comic legend. I mean, he fills in for David Letterman when David couldn't do the show. He hosted David Letterman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It's amazing. Everybody bows down to Tom because he's had such a career. He's such a great comic, and he was personal friends with Frank Sinatra. Wait till you hear these stories. But he also has a lot to tell us and teach us about dreaming up, because he came from a life that was not so pleasant growing up, and really turned his whole world around and is really literally living the dream, man. Excellent.
Yeah. So, I think it's really exciting. Todd, tell people a little bit about you. I mean, have you achieved a dream or two in your life that you've been after?
He's a good bass fisherman.
Did I mention high school football games? I grew up in East Texas in a small town, and I have been blessed to come from really almost the middle of nowhere into traveling the world, getting to do things with nonprofits and seeing all kind of cultures and meeting all kind of people. So I've been 100% blessed to come from where I come from to where I am now.
What Todd doesn't do with it, he's not saying he's a digital fundraiser for nonprofits worldwide. So he raises millions of dollars a year for all these great nonprofit organizations, and maybe they'll come up during conversation as we're talking about some of these things through the day. But he is helping. Actually, what he does helps tons of other people live their dreams. For example, there's this guy in Africa named Mully, who's personally adopted over 15,000 children himself off of the streets. And Todd raises funds for that. And as a matter of fact, one of Mully's kids just won 2 silver medals in the Olympics, the Summer Olympics.
Oh, he takes every one of them and lets them find their gifting, and then he pours into it, whether that's college or whether it's the Olympics, soccer teams. It's not just give them a bed and some 3 meals a day. He pours into them, finds their passion and their skill sets, and then he launches them back into life. It's amazing.
He finds them on the streets when they're little, and he's literally personally adopted over 15,000 of them. And it's truly amazing. But talk about a real dream up story. And Todd worked for him, and that's just one of Todd's clients. And it's just amazing,
One of my favorites, no doubt.
And my daughter works for him too. I'm very proud. Mully's awesome. Todd's actually met the guy.
Yeah.
He's on my bucket list of people in the world to meet. Was Charles Mully. You can actually see the Mully movie. Where's it at?
Yeah, it's at mcfus.org. It's free. It's on Amazon Prime for free. If you have Amazon Prime, and then you can go to mcfus.org and watch it, stream it free online. It is if you talk about a dream up story, he was literally abandoned by his family
at 5.
And he walked his way to Nairobi, worked himself up to being one of the richest men in Kenya. And then he decided just to stop working for money and start taking kids off the street. And like you said, adopted 15,000. He's been doing it for 30 years, and he's not done. He's still pulling people in one child at a time.
You can go to the Mully movie, Mully Mully movie. It's great. And Carl, by the way, you've seen the movie and did a story on it, didn't you?
I don't think so. Actually.
Oh, I didn't. I thought I told you about that a long time ago.
You may have told me, but I did not get a chance. But we got to move on to our first news story, because Tom Dreesen is, unfortunately got to be moving fairly quick today. All right, so every week we try to do 3 or 4 news stories that are represent dreaming up in life. And so our first story now, it's time for the news. Okay, so first up, Tesla founder Elon Musk is actually worth $193 billion. And he has so much money, he can't just spend it on Earth. So this week, he launched a SpaceX rocket ship into orbit with an all-civilian crew of a billionaire e-commerce executive and 3 less wealthy private citizens out of Cape Canaveral, Florida. Wow. They shot up to 125 miles into space and orbited the planet over every 90 minutes at 22 times the speed of sound. Musk is just one of 3 mega billionaires, along with Jeff Bezos of Amazon and Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson, to be running a private space race. The 4 seats on this flight cost a total of $200 million. What do you guys think?
Oh my word, $200 million. And they're circling the Earth. These people paid $200 million. I mean, can you imagine that? And they're 363 miles up. That's the difference from Little Rock to Dallas. That's all the distance they are away when they get to that spot. Like, you know how much a mile they're paying? Just think of the Uber charges on that sucker. My God, I can't even believe it.
No wonder they don't wear their mask on the plane, but they have to turn the ship around and land just in case they're not wearing their mask. That's going to be very expensive for somebody.
Absolutely. Well, how do you have that much money? How bored are you with your life when you go, let's see, I've got $200 million. I can go up in space for 4 days or feed every starving person in Chad. Let's go to space, guys. Let's go to space.
Well, that's one of the arguments that people are making against these billionaires trying to do the private space thing. I mean, on the one hand, we applaud innovation. We applaud, these guys earned their way to their fortunes, and they're prime examples of how capitalism can work. But at the same time, you were joking, but I mean, is there some sort of responsibility at which these guys should be instead trying to figure out how to spend, billions on solving the water crisis in the world or something else like it?
Bill Gates does a lot of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Bill Gates he's always trying to, he gives a lot of his money away, and then he talked Warren Buffett into giving his money away. But I like the idea of buying appreciating assets. So a trip to space is a depreciating asset.
A little bit.
Yeah. 4 days, $200 million. By the way, that 200 million, I think that was the amount of my overdraft last week in my bank account. Good night. 200 million. But if you bought an appreciating asset, something that could give perpetually, that's kind of what I'm actually in search of in my life, is building up enough wealth that you're giving away things over time that it never, like when most people retire, they go, well, I have enough to last me till I die. I like the idea of something that can continue to grow, like real estate, and it can continue giving revenue. So I kind of work on that stuff, you know?
So you're saying rocket fuel is depreciated?
Yes.
Is that it? Well, in their defense, Carl, sometimes you have to fly over poor people to decide what to do with them later.
That's a good point. Good point. Fair enough. But what I find ironic, since you mentioned Bill Gates, he's the one billionaire I would like to shoot into space. I find him so annoying.
Hey,
Just keep him there. I think
here's the funny thing about that trip, right? It's 200 million, right? So you're a billionaire and you're like, I want to go into space, so I'm doing this. But how many of your friends have enough money to go along with you? You're like, God, I don't want to do it alone. Do you pay the extra money for him to come? It's kind of like you and me going to lunch, Carl.
Well,
I'm always paying, buddy.
Well, the tab for a lunch with me can run $200 million.
Yes.
But the other thing is, when you're talking about depreciating assets, I'm thinking like when you buy a car, they say you lose like $3,000 when you just go off the lot. So Elon Musk pays for this rocket to be invented, and then imagine the depreciation on the value of the rocket once it's shot into space. I mean, big chunks of it are designed to fall off and never be used again. It's like not the smartest investment.
It was crazy. I was actually in Orlando when it launched and watched the whole launch. It was beautiful, to be honest. It was quite amazing. And I'd watched one of the space shuttles before 26 years ago. It was amazing. I'm always impressed. The one thing I will give all these guys credit for is I really applaud the idea to get an idea in your head and actually make it happen. I really admire people that can come up with something and then go, I'm going to figure out how to get there. It's such a goal-oriented process. Not many people can pull all that stuff off. One of my best friends, George Wallace, has the ability to go, I'm going to do this now. And he goes and he does it. And I just sit back in awe. I sit back in awe because we can try things and sometimes we bump into the wall because of whatever reasons, but some people have the ability. Don't you know people like that?
Oh, no, I love it. Think about it. Whatever made it where you can afford $200 million, you have a certain type of personality. I have a feeling these guys actually don't even care about the view out the window. They're just trying to come up with the ace of spades at dinner parties.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
It's like somebody like, hey, I went to the Grand Prix last week. Well, I orbited Earth.
Well, we got to hustle through one more story. I'm going to make a call, and I figure that unless you guys have any final points about this one, but
no, go ahead, buddy. We've drubbed that one into the ground.
I think I'm going to jump to one other story about crazy rich people and their dreams. There's some people that dream of living forever, right? So frozen bodies and brains of wealthy Brits and Americans, the British and Americans, were snatched from a Russian lab where they were stored in the hope of being brought back to life. A cryogenics firm in Russia's owner's bitter divorce led to a raid. Valeria Udalova raided a cryogenic facility run by her ex-husband, Danila Medvedev. I think that, they even sound like James Bond supervillains. So these people actually were having their brains and bodies brought into, sorry, I'm having trouble reading my cue here. But they had there was a raid done by the wife. She employed a team to go in and steal the bodies. And there was something like 82 bodies, including 25 foreigners, disappeared. And they had paid $11,000 to save their bodies and $6,000 each to save their brains. And now it's all gone. They've disappeared, and any hope of the cryogenics ever working is gone. So can you imagine like spending all that money and then literally losing your head over it?
Hey, I get brain freeze when I drink a Slurpee. I couldn't imagine coming out of cryogenics. I feel like a year's long. I can't take it. I got such a headache. That is so fascinating. I think money doesn't, look, our show is about dreaming up and achieving your dreams. And that often has to do with money. But money doesn't buy everything. It doesn't buy eternal life. It doesn't buy happiness. To me, money buys you time. And first of all, what is comedy, Carl? Comedy is tragedy plus time.
Yeah.
Right? Man, if we had more time, I would be like the funniest comedian on the planet. but Carl didn't even get it. Thank you, Carl.
Sorry.
So comedy is tragedy plus time, but I think success is money, which gives you time plus a positive direction. So it's how you use that. I find it kind of sad that people are trying to hold on to their mortality by freezing. I don't, it's so weird to me.
Yeah, coming back, first of all, I can't remember my passwords already. And then, let me sleep for a couple of years and wake back up. I'll never get back into Gmail again. But I may need 2 lifetimes to reach my goals. I don't know. I'm sort of interested in this, but I'm not going to this Russia guy because he doesn't know how to put a padlock on the freezer, apparently.
Well, it's only $11,000 compared to the $50 million it costs for a seat on the space flight. If they could actually work and they could actually secure your body as promised, it's not that bad a deal,
I don't know. Boy, Carl, would you fit in there?
Well, if
would they charge you the same amount?
If they remove my head, they probably could try to fit me in there. Yeah. But
your old nickname, you remember your old Carl the Girth Kozlowski? It was the Girth, wasn't it? Girth?
Well, that has many meanings, but anyway. but it does make me remember. It reminded me of, we had one other news story. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but there was a study showing that people believe that money should be used to get you the time to enjoy things, as you mentioned. And so they found that if you have 2 hours of free time a day, that's the most that you should have in order to be at your full potential. But if you get past 2 hours, you start kind of hurting your potential in life. And if you get to 5 hours a day, you're actively hurting, you're becoming like a lazy bum that won't get anything done if you reach 5 hours a day of inactivity and not doing anything productive.
I'm just curious, asking for a friend, what happens at 10 hours a day? I'm just curious.
So you're saying you don't have that much to do?
Is there a chart that goes to 10? I'm just asking.
Just for a random friend.
Just for a random friend.
Friend
who takes naps all day.
Of course. But speaking of time, we've got to bring in our guest now. So 1 second, folks, we're going to have him on board. Okay, folks, as I said, it's time for this week's guest. He's a literal comedy legend who not only toured the world for decades with Frank Sinatra as his opening act, but he also was one of just 4 comics to be so loved by David Letterman that he invited him to be a guest on his show throughout his entire 4-decade career annually. He's also overcome incredible odds to get over there. So give it up for Tom DREESEN.
Comedy legend in the house, Tom DREESEN.
Thank you. That's very nice, Carl, Todd, and Ron. But you know how you become a legend? All your critics are dead. I outlived all my critics.
You know what's funny? Carl was introducing you, and he wrote it right, but the way he read it, it sounded like for years he toured with Frank Sinatra as his opening act. So Frank opened for you, apparently. The way Carl read that.
Oh, well.
That's okay. I like to think that they always say that I opened for Frank for 14 years. I like to think that Frank closed for me was the way I always.
There you go. Yeah.
You actually became real good friends with him, but we'll get into that later. Your story, I've known you for well over 20 years. You and I have done a lot of stand-up together in the clubs, and I've always loved your act and appreciated you as a person. But let's kind of jump into your growing up. You grew up in the south part of Chicago, just down there. And what was that like?
I grew up in a suburb on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. It was steel mills and factories and blue collar people, hardworking people. There were 36 taverns where I grew up at, and my mom was a bartender in one of those taverns. I shined shoes in all the taverns. The mantra where I grew up at that time, the mantra in our neighborhood was, you only deserve in life what you work for. You know, and I had 8 brothers and sisters, and we lived in a shack. It was a rat-infested, roach-infested shack. And you know, if a window broke, you stuck a rag in it. If you have holes in your shoes, you put cardboard in it. You know, And so I shined shoes in taverns from the time I was 8 years old till I was 12. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner, and I had a paper route.
You were always working, always working.
Well, that was just the mantra. My father was an alcoholic. He a nice man, but alcohol was his master. So we were raggedy poor. And none of this do I regret, by the way. I've always said this all my life, that all of life is about perception. I perceive that as the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because you develop a lot of character, and also you realize.
Well, let's slow down on that, Tom. Let's slow down on that, because the current culture, in my opinion, glorifies a victim. It's I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim.
Yeah.
We need to help the victim. We need to help the victim. Why are you saying what appears to me to be the opposite of it? Or am I reading what you're saying wrong?
It was just the way I was raised, that again, you only deserve in life what you work for. And also my older brother was 3 years older than me and a hard worker, and he took me everywhere. And what I learned early in life, that if it is to be, it's up to me. And that's sitting on my desk right now, that motto. If it is to be, it's up to me. And I'll tell you something that I tell young kids all the time. And I've even used this in my nightclub act. I said to a bunch of young kids one day, how long should you live with your parents? And one boy said, well, till we're 50 or 60 years old. And I said, why do you say that? He said, because we didn't ask to be here. And I said, oh, I see. Well, then let me explain something to you. You didn't ask to be here. I don't want to give you a biology lesson, but when the male and the female make love, from the male comes 5 million seeds. Did you know that? 2.5 million die instantly. The other millions die along the way. And soon there's only 100,000 seeds left. Then there's 50,000. There's 100 seeds left. And I said, there's 5 seeds left. 4, 3, 2, 1. You. Don't ever tell me you didn't ask to be here. Bullshit. You fought to be here. I'm in a room full of winners, and I say, applaud yourselves. You're not a victim. You're a victor. 5 million to 1 says you wouldn't get here, but you got here. You were born a victor. You're not a victim.
I like that. I like that. We have a saying in my house, hard work always pays off. I say that continually to my kids. To one of them, it really clicked in. To the other one, still learning. But it's really fascinating, the difference between a victim and a non-victim, and how do you take someone from that? Because obviously it must have been your brother that instilled that in you more than anyone. Probably he was probably a bigger influence in your life.
But it was also the neighborhood. Everybody. My sister went to work at 14. Everybody went to work to pitch in, to help out. That was part of it. That my older brother. But again, when you're raised in that type of situation, here's the other thing I tell young people. It's all about perception. I perceive that as a blessing. Now, I tell people that life is about perception. It's how you perceive it. A little boy goes in the backyard with a bat and a ball. And he said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. And he throws the ball up near and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. He throws it up the second time and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest hitter in the world. And he throws it up the third time and he swings and he misses. He said, I'm the greatest pitcher in the world.
Change the perspective. I love
Change
it.
your perception.
Well, speaking of your perspective and perception, I don't want to jump all the way into your comedy career yet, but just in general, though, did you have a sense of humor even while going through all these hardships? I imagine you must have developed that pretty early in life. And how do you think that you managed to look at things in a way that, that you could laugh about your problems, at least to some extent, and keep your head, on straight that way?
Carl, you just described what I say to the class. What is a sense of humor? A sense of humor is not when you have the ability. By the way, let me digress. A sense of humor is the greatest gift a God can bestow upon a human being. And it can be taught to your children. And I tell that to classes too. But a sense of humor is not when you have the ability to laugh at other shortcomings and misfortunes. It's when you have the ability to laugh at your own. When you can learn to laugh at yourself. Psychiatrists would probably tell you the number one problem their patients have is they take themselves too serious. All of us take ourselves too serious, and so if you can learn to laugh at yourself, by the way, if you do that, if you can laugh at yourself, people will gravitate to you. People love a human being that can laugh at themselves. you'll become very popular in your neighborhood, in your community. When I was a little boy, I loved to hear the sound of laughter. I wrote a poem, which I won't do for you, many years ago, called The Sound of Laughter. And the first line is, as far back as I can remember, or shortly thereafter, I love to hear the sound of laughter. So poking fun at myself sometimes, and laughing at myself, others would laugh along with me. It's healthy for you to learn to laugh at yourself.
Yeah, Napoleon Bonaparte said we laugh so we don't cry. And comedy is tragedy plus time, right, Tom?
No question about it. And whenever, like young writers would say to me in my comedy career, gee, I'd like to write a joke or two for you. What do you want me to write about? I'll say, what hurts you? Show me your pain. Sometimes if you show the audience your pain,
they can relate to it, right?
Yeah, of course, because we're all, we all have bad days and good days. No one gets through this life unscathed. There's heartache and hardship in everybody's life. And we, the comedians, we get up on stage. First of all, again, I'll digress. I think the comedian is that boy. You remember the fable about the emperor and his clothing? And the emperor had this thought they were designing this incredible clothing for him. They were putting nothing on him. But anybody who didn't see this clothing is a fool. So no one's going to admit, the king's not going to admit he couldn't see it. The people around the king, well, yeah, they kept saying it looks lovely. So now he's going to show it to the kingdom. He walks out and showing all the people in the community, and they're all going, ooh, ah, because they don't want to admit they're fools. And a little boy says, he doesn't have any clothes on. And one of the adults said, you hear what that little boy said? And finally someone said, I got to tell you something. I don't see anything either. And before you know it, the little boy, that's who the comedian is. We expose the truth through childlike eyes.
That's a really, really interesting angle. Look, I've been performing comedy for 40 years, since I was 10, and street performing, but forms of comedy. And I've never looked at it from that angle. And that's really beautiful. Thank you for saying that, Tom. That's great.
Well, let me explain something else to you. That whenever they talk about comedians, they sometimes use childlike phrases. Johnny Carson was this incredible comedian. Bob Hope could do. Johnny Carson would come out on this monologue, and he would say, he'd be talking about the zoo, and Ed McMahon would interrupt him and said, "You like the zoo?" He said, "Yes." He said, "What's your favorite animal?" And Johnny would go, "Beavers." And he would just smile and wouldn't say a word. Now, a Bible thumping woman in the Midwest would say, "Isn't Johnny the Dickens? Isn't Johnny the Dickens?" In other words, it's okay to be naughty, but not dirty.
Yeah.
And the little boy can be naughty. If a little boy says something filthy, stop that. We recommend. But if he says something naughty, we all laugh. Bob Hope sometimes with childlike quality, or Johnny Carson would become that little boy and say something naughty. And
that's a great dissection there too. Really, really good. Really, really good, Tom. Wow. You are teaching me well, big Jedi.
I want to follow up with Carl's question to you. Obviously, growing up in a tough neighborhood has given you work ethic, and I would also say it may be your motivation for comedy. But did you grow up in a funny family? Did you mature your comedy over time, or were y'all always funny and you just took it to the stage?
Well, first of all, I went to Catholic school, and nuns do not reward you for ad libs.
Let me see your knuckles. Let me see your knuckles.
Yeah.
Every Christmas, we'd buy Mother Superior a shoulder holster for her ruler so she could get it out faster. But I actually, what really turned me on as a little boy, shining shoes in all the bars in my neighborhood. There were 8 taverns. There were 36 in Harvey, but there were 8 in my neighborhood. And I would shine shoes in all the taverns. And the last one I'd go to was where my mother was a bartender, because my uncle owned the bar, her brother-in-law, her sister's husband. And I would wait there and sit in the corner and have a little Pepsi Cola while the shifts would change. And then I'd go back to the bars again. But while I was there, my uncle, Frank Sinatra, was a funny storyteller, and he could do dialects, and he would have the bar laughing with jokes. And it fascinated me, even as a little boy, that with this man's vocabulary and his inflection, he could say a word and cause this sound to come out of everybody's body that filled the room like electricity and united everybody. And that fascinated me, that joke telling. And I would tell many of his jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground, I might tell you. That's what turned me on. That he could make people laugh, and I wanted to be like that, and I became like that. I wanted to when I hear a good joke, I could retell it, and oftentimes I could see something as a little boy that was okay funny, but I said, I know how I could make that funnier.
Ooh,
This would have happened, you know.
I was telling jokes in first grade, second grade. The first play I was in the second grade, you know, they're saying the roles, who wants to be the windmill, who wants to be the tree? And they go, who wants to be the witch? I go, a guy is a witch. That'll get a big laugh. I go, I'm in. And I got the biggest laugh. And, you know, sometimes you just have a sense to want to make things funny, right?
Well,
but I'm the baby of 8, so I needed the attention. What about, you know, where are you in the family lineup, Tom?
You're the baby of 8 and you needed attention. Usually the baby gets all the attention.
Yes. Well, my brothers were such alcoholics, and my father died at a young age, and there was such chaos in the house. And I decided not to go down their road of trouble. And so I got attention from other ways because I was pretty much neglected by them. So it's like, I'll achieve and I'll show you guys.
Sure.
So
I was third, you know, in the family. And so I was always helping support the family. My older brother and my older sister was 18 months older than me. But again, it's all about, you know, something that makes you feel good. Where I came from, you know, there wasn't a lot to make you feel good. We had no bathtub and no shower. We had no hot water.
How did you shower? How did you get clean?
Boil water and put it in like a tub and wash. So we put this poor. So what made me feel good is when people laughed at something I did. That made me feel good all over. You know, and the very first time I wandered aimless. You know, we're probably going to get it, but when I grew up, I wandered aimless. I ended up running with a tough crowd. I set pins in bowling alleys. And I ended up dropping out of high school my sophomore year as 16 years old because I was embarrassed of the way I had to go to school with holes in my shoes and everything. And you know how high school is, how your peers, you know, guys are driving their cars or their dad's cars. And my dad never owned a car. Thank God he would have got drunk and ran somebody over, you know. But so I ended up running with a tough crowd and street fights and things, nothing that I'm proud of. Ironically, the gang that I belonged to, they wore leather jackets, and one of the guys in the gang, a guy named Russ LeBou, he painted the Joker from the Batman and Robin comic. He painted the Joker on the back of our jackets, and we were called the Jokers. You know, it was a tough street gang. Anyhow, by the time I was 17, I got in trouble with the law a little bit in fights, and I finally got into the Navy, and I joined the Navy at 17. Got a high school diploma from the Navy. You know, went to junior college nights when I came out. Studied political science because I wanted to be a politician, but then I found out being a comedian is pretty much the same as being a politician. You know.
So let's go back to the Navy, because the Navy, I bet, changed the way you perceived so many things.
No question about it. For the first time in my life, I had my own clean bed. For the first time in my life, I was equal to all my peers. They shaved their heads, and all of us wore the same clothes. You didn't know if one guy came from Beverly Hills or from Detroit. You didn't know, you know what I'm saying? So our first time I was equal to all my peers. And from that point on, it was up to me. For the first time in my life, I had 3 squares a day. For the first time in my life, I could stand under hot water for as long as I wanted to. For the first time in my life, I had more than 1 pair of shoes.
Wow.
Yes, the Navy changed my life dramatically. You know, you know, even to this day, with all the success I've had in life, I never feel as much at calm is when I stand in the hot shower and let as much hot water flow on me as I wanted to. If I walk in my walk-in closet, I got more than 1 pair of shoes. I got 40 pair of shoes in there. And they don't have any holes in them, you know. But yeah, the Navy changed my life. And all of a sudden I was now around mature men. I was around a lot of discipline, you know, and for 4 years in the Navy, I served on 2 aircraft carriers, but I also served in a Marine Corps unit called NEGDF. Naval Emergency Ground Defense Force. And so the drill instructor, after a very tough week called Hell Week, he once said to me, he said, "DREESEN, the rest of your life, you'll judge every man you meet by what I want to be in a foxhole with him." And it's strange, but I do. As I get to know people, I'd say to myself, if the shit hits the fan, would I want Ronnie on my back, or would I want whoever, you know? And yes, it changed my life dramatically. And when I came out of the service, you know, I ended up getting married and have children, but I wandered aimlessly. I went from job to job to job. I was a private detective. I was a photographer helping my brother. I went on a loading dock and I became a Teamster loading trucks. Then I dropped my card as a Teamster and became management. And I was now the foreman of 48 Teamsters, tough guys from Cicero, Illinois, and Chicago, you know. But I was a bartender always. I always did that part-time. I worked construction. I wheeled concrete and sidewalks and basements. I just went from job to job, feeling totally unfulfilled. And at that time,
why is that, Tom?
Every time I would get to a job and do it, I'd learn it and learn it well, and then I got bored with it. And I kept, and I honestly would pray. I got to the point where I was praying. I was saying, God, what is it I'm supposed to be doing? Because this can't be it. I'd be in a bar at 2 o'clock in the morning with some of my buddies looking around the bar and saying, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belong. And I prayed. I said, God, what is it you think that I should be doing in life? Because this isn't it. And one day joined a civic group called the JCs. And I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor, a concept I had. And to show you how prayers are answered, a young Black man joined the chapter that very same night that I was proposing it. He graduated from Norfolk State College, and E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing rep. And he joined the JCs, a civic group. And I was proposing this to the general membership that the JCs would sanction this drug education program. They weren't teaching drug education in those days at a college or a high school level, let alone at an elementary school level. And I wanted to get to 8th graders before they got into drugs. Anyhow, this young Black man comes up to me and said, I'd like to work with you on that project. I said, gee, I've already got a guy. Thank you very much. I had a white friend named John DeBoer. The next day, as fate would have it, John DeBoer calls me and said, Tom, I can't work with you on that project. I got a new job. I said, gee, what's that Black guy's name? Oh yeah, Tim Reed. So I called Tim.
Wow.
We worked together on the project and the program became successful. The JCs use it as a model program in their publications in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries on how to teach drug education at an elementary school level. And all of it was about making the kids laugh, getting them laughing, and then music and stuff, and then planting the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. And one day, a little 8th grade girl said, you two guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. And the thought of a Black-white comedy team intrigued us. And Tim Reed and I became America's first Black and white comedy team.
In what year?
We're the last, 1969 to 1975. There were no comedy clubs. So we worked all Black clubs in the North and the South, what they affectionately called the Chitlin Circuit, Black-owned, Black-operated nightclubs.
Yeah.
Where I'd be the only white guy. It was a High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear in Chicago, the Guys in Gallic Lounge, the Cotton Club. We worked the 20 Grand in Detroit, was where Motown was in Detroit at that time. And all the Motown acts broke their acts in the 20 Grand. A gangster named Bill Kabush owned it. We did the Club Harlem in Atlantic City, the Sugar Shack in Boston. And then we did the Playboy circuit too. We did white clubs. But we became America's first Black and white comedy team. But the first night, and I'll end it here, the very first night that I went on stage, something I had written got a laugh. And it was like one of those B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts through and my whole being went, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do. Yeah, I want to be a stand-up comedian. I couldn't sleep that whole night. It was a Friday night. I got up the next morning. I went to the church where I had been an altar boy, where I sang in the choir when I was a little boy. And I prayed. I was the only one in church. It was a Saturday morning. I prayed. I said, God, now I know. I want to be a comedian. If you could let me make my living as a comedian, I'll never ask for anything else. I promise I'll do charities. I'll give back. I now know what it is that I want to do. And I prayed in that church all alone. That was September 1969. In September 2019, I went back to that same church and I gave a sermon on a Sunday to the congregation on the power of prayer. And I told the audience, right, I said, the congregation, I knelt right there and I prayed for everything that's in my life. Yes, dreams come true and prayers are answered.
Amen
Wow,
to that.
that is great. Well, the rulers on the knuckles worked after all. Sounds like got your attention. I do have a question. How long did it take you to define your voice? Like you two weren't professional comedians. you did have some chemistry. How long did it take to mature that till you guys were just killing it in these clubs?
It took a while because we were better salesmen than we were comedians. And when Tim was a marketing referee at DuPont and I was selling life insurance at the time, we could get into any office, any manager, any agent. We had the sales skills, but on stage, we didn't have those skills. We were like every other new comedian, trying this and trying that, and then reading about other comedians and just giving it a shot. But I had a skill for writing, and Tim had a great skill for acting. And the combination.
For those that don't know, Tim went on to be on WKRP in Cincinnati with a stellar career, just like
Venus
you. But
Flytrap, yeah.
Yes.
On 20 sitcoms. He was on Sister, Simon and Simon. He was on, I don't know how many sitcoms. He's a successful director and one of my dearest friends in the whole world, and I love him to death. And everything I own and everything I am and everything I'm about is because I met this man. He was God sent to me. And he feels the same way about me. His children, I was there before they were born. His children call me Uncle Tom, which is really a funny thing.
That's funny.
Better you than him.
So you developed your voice, but then you had to pivot again because you and Tim had that great team act. I actually did a team comedy juggling act for till I was 19 years old, and then went solo. And it's a whole different muscle when you're solo because it's all on your shoulders. You're painting the entire picture. And how was that pivot for you going to a solo act?
Well, let me say this. To me, it was a blessing in a lot of ways. I mean, Tim and I had a great chemistry. And when we got our legs is when we started doing the Playboy circuit, because the Playboy circuit, there were 17 Playboy clubs in America and 2 resorts, Great Gorge and Lake Geneva. We did 5 shows a night in the Playboy clubs, 6 shows in Boston. You do the penthouse and the playroom, you go upstairs and downstairs. Our timing, we got like a one guy reviewed us one time and said to watch Tim and Tom is to watch a masterful ping pong match because our timing got beautiful.
That's nice.
But when I went off alone, at first it was scary to me because I'd never been on stage alone when the team split up. But also when you're alone, I can ad lib within the confines. When you're with a comedy team, you got to be very much aware of your partner and his laugh. Don't step on his laugh. There's a rhythm and a system, and we got real good at it. But I'll tell you, I talked to Jerry Lewis for years. Jerry became a real good friend. I used to do the telethons. We used to talk about him and Dean. That fascinated me. I want to hear those stories about him and Dean. But he said something really interesting. He said, Tom, when Dean and I started out, we didn't have any material. We used to do jokes. Did you take a bath today? No, why? Is one missing? It wasn't about the material. It was about the love we had for one another. In those days, a Catholic and a Jew on stage together, it was like, ooh, did you know that? It was like a big deal, He said, the love we had for one another caused the chemistry, and the audience saw that love we had for one another, and they also saw when we didn't have that love for one another.
Wow.
So I worked with the Smothers Brothers a few years back, and I was talking with Tommy before the show. We're having a ball. After the show, I'm talking with Dick. Tom comes over to Dick while I'm talking to him and is furious about how he bowed. He goes, when you bowed too far. That's not funny. That bow is funny. That bow's not funny. And they argued like really, they both turned and walked off in complete anger. They've been doing their act for, I don't know, 50 years at least. Yeah. It's really fascinating how people don't understand the nuances of comedy, and it's so delicate. You have to be so precise with everything, and with a partner, you have to be another level of precise. But
it's crucial. It's all about timing, and it's all about laughter. If you dissect comedy, it gets boring. If you dissect it, it gets boring. But whenever I say I can teach comedians, and I do. I've given classes for years. I do a thing called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and how to get there, but I do it in universities and stuff. But I can teach you a lot of things. I can't teach you timing. You either have it or you don't. And when I try to describe timing, and again, when you dissect comedy, it gets boring, but I say, pretend there's a big pond of water in front of you and you throw a rock as high as you can in the air, and then the rock starts to come down, and then it hits the pond and it ripples across the pond. Let's say that's laughter. When that rock is on its way up, you don't move on your next line. You just stepped on your laugh or your partner's laugh. So some nights when I'm out there, I let that rock come down a little bit and I move. Some nights I let it come down a little bit more and I move. Some nights I let it hit the pond And then some nights I let it hit the pond and ripple all the way across the pond before I move. I can't tell you before I go on stage what I'm going to do. My brain catches up to the audience. We get in sync. You know, if I did a 30-minute set at the Laugh Factory tonight, and tomorrow I did that same exact 30 minutes in front of a Laugh Factory, say in front of 200 people. But if I did that same exact 30 minutes the next night in front of Frank Sinatra, in front of 20,000 people, that same material takes on a totally different dynamic.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you before I go out there, but that's what I'm talking about, timing.
My first night at the old room, the old main room at Caesar's Palace. I was 29 years old. I was opening for Earth, Wind and Fire. And I did my first night, and it's that long, narrow room with the two balconies up, right? You have the flat in front of you and then one level up and one level up. So I finished the show, and George Wallace calls me that night. He goes, how'd it go? Because George has played the room 1,000 times. I'm sure you've played it 1,000 times, but that was my first there. And I go, well, good. He goes, good, right? But not great. I go, yeah. He goes, here's the key to that room. Say the joke. You'll hear the bottom level laugh. When the second level laughs, as soon as the third one starts, start your next joke. I did that the next night, improved my act 30% at least. It's just amazing, the rhythms of different sizes. And
well, I got to I've been contract in Vegas to maybe 9 different hotels, you know, in my years there. You know, Caesar's Palace is the one I hated the most. It's the first one I ever worked. But to me, I love the Sands. I love the Desert Inn. I love the Riviera. I love the Golden Nugget downtown. You know why? Because they had small ceilings, you know, intimate audiences. And so laughter is sound. It hits the ceiling and comes at you. And we set our rhythm off of that. You know, Caesar's has got a high ceiling.
Very high.
It's not a good. That's why you don't want to work outdoors. You know, comedians, after years go by, you can walk into a room. I can walk into a room with 5 comedians. We'll look around, look at each other, and just go, we're going to bomb here tonight. You know, we know things have to be in place. Certainly, you know, also when I first went to Caesar's, they serve food for the comedian. The comedians on stage, the waiters and waitresses are hauling food in and out of the audience. I mean, it was a nightmare. You know,
yes.
That's when I first went there. Sammy Davis Jr. I opened for Sammy Davis. He knew that, and he wanted me to score. He told the conductor. The conductor said, "Tommy, you'll go on." And Nat Brandywine, the entertainment director, he said, "Tommy, you'll go on before Sammy. You'll do 20 minutes. Sammy will do 1 hour and 10. We do 90-minute shows here." Sammy said, "No, hold on, Nat. This is Tommy's first time here, and he's got to score." He said, "I'll go on first. I'll do 3 or 4 songs, and then I'll bring Tommy out." He said, "All the critics are in the audience. Tommy's got to score this first time." He looked at me and said, "Tommy, if you score, you'll be coming back here for years to come."
Wow.
He was such a giving guy. He went out and did 3 or 4 songs. Now, when the waiters and waitresses see the headliner come out, they got to get that food out of there. They were snatching food off the table from people who hadn't started eating yet.
Yeah.
But when Sammy was done with 4 songs, the room was emptied and there were people were up here. And Sammy said to the audience, "You've been wonderful to me through the years." He said, "So I think of my audience like family. And when family does something for you, you want to do something for them, like maybe bring them a gift. I got a gift for you. I saw this comedian." And I'm in the wings going, "Damn, Sammy, don't go too high with this introduction." But that's how he'd bring me out. He said, it's his first time in Las Vegas. And I'd walk out and the crowd was already sitting because Sammy just did 4 great songs. And I would always open every night. I say, all my life, I dreamed that I would work Las Vegas. And I dreamed it would be Caesar's Palace, but I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act.
Hey, how did he know? How did he first find you?
I did his TV show, Sammy and Company.
Yeah.
And I did all those routines about growing up in a black neighborhood, which I did. And I played basketball on an all black basketball team. I played football as a running back on a black football team. So I told these stories and just had the audience, and Sammy just fell apart.
So what catapulted you up when you first separated from Tim and did solo? What knocked you to the next level?
No doubt about it. In 1975, wherever you went in America, people say, "What do you do for a living?" And you say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." The next question out of their mouth was, "Oh yeah, have you ever been on Johnny Carson?" Because if you hadn't been on Johnny Carson in the eyes of America, you might want to be a comedian, you might go to be one, but you weren't one now. And that show, of all the shows in those days, that show launched. Freddie Prinze did 1 appearance on the Tonight Show, got a sitcom the next day. I did 1 appearance on the Tonight Show. I got bumped 3 times. I got on the 4th time. And the fourth time I got on, it was a hot crowd. The next day, CBS signed me to a development deal.
Wow.
William Morris signed me. I started doing Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand. I was the only white comedian ever to be on Soul Train. I was doing Hollywood Squares, $25,000 pyramid. That show,
Wow.
I did 61 appearances on the Tonight Show, but I never stopped.
61 on the Tonight Show, which is legendary. Most people don't have that much material. How did you develop that much material? Because back then it was 7-minute sets, Tom. You were doing a 7-minute set. Now it's 4 minutes, 4.5.
You're wrong. It was a 7-minute segment.
Oh, segment. So
you would do like a 5-minute bit and then go over and talk to Johnny. He didn't let you,
because you got called over to the couch. But what about those of us that weren't called over to the couch?
No,
okay. Oh, now you just set the level. Okay. You dreamed up a little higher than me. Thank you, Tom Dreesen.
By the way, we'll get to that later on about visualization. I want to remember what you just said to me about sitting down and standing there. Anyhow, but I had to keep coming up with new material, and so that's what I did. I started writing. I was in a constant state of writing new material. I honestly believe, for comedians watching the show, I honestly believe you can't survive the long run of comedy unless you're also a writer or you have enough money to get writers. You know, Jerry Seinfeld and Chris Rock, and they've got, you know, and Jay Leno and those shows, and David. I know
Jerry still writes 3 hours a day, though. Jerry's a voracious writer.
Yeah, he's a very good writer too.
Yes.
But again, if you surround yourself with, if you can write material, you're going to go the long run, I believe.
Yeah. Or learn how to juggle, because that really works, Tom. It's worked for me. No one laughed at that. You all just kind of stared at me. Carl, you've had your head buried down for an hour here, buddy.
Well, I mean, that was you had so many questions, but I mean, I guess what I wanted to ask about is, you know, that you're mentioning Sammy Davis Jr. and then you're quite famous for, like I said, opening for Sinatra. So when did that step jump in? Was that before or after the Tonight Show? And what was it like getting to travel the world with a legend, but you're in a spot where, you know, people no doubt loved your act, but they're also, you know, sort of really also there to see Sinatra. So was that odd for you? Did you mind that? And how did you manage to take advantage of that and still, you know, win fans over when you were touring with him?
Well, you know, first of all, of the 17 questions you just asked me,
Way to go, Tom. I wrote them down for you. Go ahead.
Let me start with the beginning.
That was half the show, by the way. Thank you, Carl.
Carl, I love
bottled up. Sorry. Okay.
Carl, I love your new toupee. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a hat. But anyhow, it looked. Anyhow, start with the beginning. After I first did the Tonight Show, I started touring with Sammy Davis Jr. But I started touring with a lot of other singers because in those days you had to work clean. You know, the television was very small. When cable came along, you could work as filthy as you want to work. But in my day, you had to work clean. You couldn't say damn or hell on TV. So singers were looking for comedians that wouldn't offend their audiences. So I was not only touring with Sammy Davis, but Tony Orlando and Don and Mac Davis and Frankie Avalon and James Darren and Natalie Cole and Gladys Knight and the Pips. They were all wanting me as an opening act because I wasn't going to offend their audience, you know. And then also I started touring with Smokey Robinson, and Smokey and I have been buddies ever since. He's one of my dearest friends.
What a class act too.
Oh, he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. Anyhow, but while I'm touring with Smokey for years, one time we were in Lake Tahoe at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, and Sinatra was appearing next door at Harrah's. And I loved Harrah's Hotel because I used to perform there. I thought it was a great comedy room. So I was working at Caesars, and I thought one of these days I'm going to go over and catch Frank's act. Frank was there to show you how fate is again, that I was with Smokey for 7 days there, touring at performing at Caesars. I could have won any day, but for some reason I went on a Wednesday night. I said, I'm going to go over and catch Frank's show. The people at Harrah's knew me, so I called them in advance, and they said, just come over to the maitre d', I'll rush you right in. I'm rushing over there. After I got off stage, I didn't even change out of my stage clothes. I ran over to Harrah's. I'm running into the showroom, and the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, was standing out in front of the showroom with a heavy set guy with a cigar. And as I was running into the showroom, he saw me. He said, Tommy, come here, come here. I go over there and he said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer. And he said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen. And I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he'd heard that a million times. And he went to the vice president, and I caught the wink. And he looked at me and he said, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? He broke up laughing, like you just said. And he said, I like this kid. A week later, I get a call. Would you like to work with Frank Sinatra for 1 week at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City? And I said, yeah, I figure I'll get my picture taken with him. I'll hang in every bar back in Chicago, and that'll be cool.
Yeah.
And the second night I'm with him, he and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. In the middle of dinner, he said to me, I can remember like it was yesterday. He set his knife and his fork down. He said, I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar. I said, oh, yeah. I said, yeah. And it turned into 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year, a friendship that I treasure. I miss him every day of my life. I stayed in his home 6 times a year. We hung out he never went to bed till the sun came up, whether we were on the road or off the road. So I would hang out with him till dawn when I stayed with him, and even on the road. And I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral. So I miss him every day. Now, to get to what was it like to open for this man? You got to, at that time, I had been touring with Smokey, Sammy. They drew 2,000, 2,500 people. Frank drew 20,000 people wherever he went in arenas, not to mention in Hawaii, 40,000 people. So the dynamics of that are totally different from what I'd been used to. But I was also a veteran when I started the tour with Frank. I had done like 40 Tonight shows. I was a veteran, and I had some experience. So when I did hit the stage, oftentimes there were people in the audience who recognized me, but they came to see Frank. So I would always say, and I'll do this to say to Carl, in answer to your question, Carl. If you were standing in the wings and there's 20,000 people out there, this is what your job is. They would come to you and say, Carl, there's 20,000 people out there. I want you to go out there, and they're in the round. They're behind you. They're all around you. So you're in the center of a big arena. I want you to go out there and stand in the center of that arena. And for the next 40 minutes, I want you to hold their attention. Oh, one more thing, Carl. I want you to hold their attention. I want you to make them laugh for the next 40 minutes. Oh, one more thing, Carl. I want you to hold their attention and make them laugh. I want you to make them laugh when you want them to laugh. I want you to pull the strings on the emotions of 20,000 people. No props, no tricks, no charts, no special arrangement, no special lighting, no orchestra, just you and 20,000 people. And one more thing, Carl, not one of them came to see you.
It's a skill.
It is a skill.
That's what I did, you guys. Here's the skill. Because I had been a veteran, when I walked out there, I know damn well, first of all, I'm not going to start with my A material. You're going to waste it if you walk out and start doing A material. You first got to bring that focus to you. If there's 20,000 people in the arena, you can bet there's 3,000 still trying to find their seats. You know, So when you walk out there, I've got to bring them to me. I got to bring them to center stage. So I'd walk out there and I'd say, how about a nice round of applause for the orchestra in the pit or something that introduce you? I'd say, how about a nice round of applause for the orchestra? Give them a nice round. And they'd applaud. I talk, you react. I'd say, how many of you are in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. Notice I didn't say raise your hand. I said, how many are out in this arena or in this arena for your very first time? Applaud. They'd applaud. I'd say, and I'd be walking the stage. How many of you out there are seeing Frank Sinatra live your very first time? Applaud. They'd applaud. I'd say, how many of you out there aren't wearing any underwear? Applaud. You know, they applaud. I talk, you react. I talk, you react. Then I would do a local joke about the local mayor or the governor. I'd have a couple of jokes that, you know, just throwaway jokes, but just to say, you know, the governor, you know, whatever his name, Governor Dupree, this morning, I called him on the phone, told him I was coming, and I'd do something. Whatever it was, I'd do a couple, and then I'd go into my A material, you know, but first I had to bring that focus to me. You know, I talk, you react. I talk, you react. And it worked. And it was exciting. Nothing like getting 20,000 people in the palm of your hand and they're laughing at your material. I mean, you know, that's why I stayed with Frank. Frank Sinatra wanted a younger comedian at that time, and he wanted somebody that could keep coming up with new material because we kept going to the same cities all the time, you know.
Jackie Kahane, my good friend who opened for Elvis for 7 years, had the same issue. A lot of the same audiences will travel the circuit and be at the same show, so they know you.
Over and over. You know your act, so you got to keep coming up with new material. But guys, I'll end with this. of all the shows I've done, all the people I toured with, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful career. And like Frank sang, the best is yet to come. But there's no describing the world of Frank Sinatra. It's time to go on the road. A limousine would pull up in front. Two big guys would carry all my luggage down. They'd carry me down if I wanted to be carried down. You know, they'd drive you out to the private jet, right out to the tarmac. You'd get out, you know, you'd get out and they'd load your luggage. You'd get on the plane. And the moment Frank stepped on the plane, that plane better be fuel, everything better be ready to go. The pilot's name was Johnny Spots. Frank would get on the plane and he'd say, "Let's go, Spots." And moments later, we're going down the runway. We'd land, squad cars and limousines rush us to the arena. We'd do the show. Squad cars and limousines rush us back to the jet. We'd be flying over the arena. People weren't even in their cars yet. We're on our way to the next city. Man, there is no describing the world of Frank Sinatra. One of my buddies in the neighborhood said, "Hey, Tommy, tell the truth. Tell the truth. It's Frank Sinatra's world, and you just live in it." I said, "Yeah, but that ain't a bad world to live in, pal."
Wow. So then, when how did you make the adjustment to, you know, now you're like, you are a name and you get to travel the country doing special events. You do the motivational speaking, you do your stand-up, you do corporate stuff. So I guess like, because Sinatra died about 15, 20 years ago, correct? Yeah. So is that when you made the shift to being your own headliner, or were you doing that all along? Like, you know, like half the year doing one, half the year doing the other, or what?
Oh yeah, I was. I mean, I had like corporate dates. Corporate America would hire me a lot, again, because I could work clean. I wouldn't offend their clients or their employees. You know, so I was doing a lot of corporate dates where I would headline the corporate date. I could also go to certain clubs and headline the club. You know, now, you know, clubs that seated 200, 300 people. I could do that. You know, but certainly not 20,000 seat arenas. Very few people can do that in our business. You know, people do it for a short period of time. No one like Frank Sinatra for 60 years, he was a star. You know, yeah. Some people stars 5 years, 10 years. But, and then the other thing is that when I was a little boy, I caddied. I fell in love with golf as a little boy caddy. And so I play in golf tournaments all the time. The Bob Hope Classic, Bob Hope would bring me there. The AT&T, Clint Eastwood had the AT&T every year I play in that. They had always asked the comedian, could you get up and do a few minutes for the crowd at the banquet at the end of the golf tournament? Well, it's the comedian, we don't need a band, we don't need rehearsal. We get up, do 5, 10, 20 minutes. In that audience were Fortune 500 companies in all those places. You know, so Allstate and American Airlines and IBM. So I was getting a lot of corporate work from that. So I was always busy. You know, in fact, I was on a plane one time heading east and I looked out the window and I saw myself on a plane going west. And that's when I realized I was working too much.
Look, you made a promise to God and you fulfilled that promise when you found what it was you wanted. You're going to give back and you're going to do all sorts of things. So you do tons of things to help inspire other people motivationally. What things are you teaching people now?
You know, now to quick digress, I did so many charities, but every year I used to also run 26 miles for multiple sclerosis in my promise to God. My sister Darlene had MS, so I would run 26 miles and people would pledge money for every mile I run. And I'd bring in celebrities to run part of the way with me. You know, all these celebrities I mentioned, Frankie Valli and Tony Danza and Frankie Avalon and you know, Smokey Robinson. Smokey's the only one who ran all 26 miles with me. The others would run 5 or 2 miles or 1 mile, whatever they want. So I paid back all that charity. But then the other thing that I did, ever since when I was in the Navy, I realized that I came from such a negative background. I didn't want to return to that, you know, and so I started reading books, and I started reading positive mental attitude books. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, A Guide to Confident Living, Claude Bristol, The Magic of Believing, U.S. Anderson, 3 Magic Words, the PMA by W. Clement Stone and Dale Carnegie, Think and Grow Rich. But the book that really changed my path in life was called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Whatever the mind can see and believe it will achieve was written thousands of years ago. And that book taught me how to envision the end result that I wanted and how to do it. You know, and so once I started applying these sciences to my life, that I was going through a lot of hardships, a lot of trouble, and they began to work. I wanted to pass this information on. So I used to do it for free. I would just go and give motivation talks to anybody who wanted to listen. I'd give it to 2 people sitting at Cantor's, Ronnie, after we finished work in the Comedy Store in those days, you know. I would
Greenblatt's, many nights.
and I continue to do that, you know. But that's what got me. I started doing it as a passion, and then I started getting hired by corporate America to give motivation talks. And now I do it sometimes like I'm doing right now, visually. And I elaborate on those 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. Perception, we discussed. The little boy in the backyard. All of life is about how you perceive it. Visualization, whatever the mind can see and believe, it will achieve. Nothing can become a reality unless it's thought first. Everything you see in front of you there, Ronnie and Carl, microphones, lampshades, whatever, the hat you got on your head, they were thoughts before they became realities. The same thing applies to your life. How you're hypnotized is they put your conscious mind at rest, and then they tell you hop like a rabbit, and you hop like a rabbit. Why? When your conscious mind is at rest, your subconscious mind is open to suggestion, and it works off of images. Whatever the mind can see and believe, it will achieve. So just before you go to bed at night, and just when you wake up in the morning, when your conscious mind is most at rest, you envision the end result you want and how you're going to feel when that happens. Whatever the mind can see and believe, it will achieve.
So tonight I'm going to say, I believe Todd will give me $1,000, and I'm going to feel good when I get it, and I'm going to believe it.
Well, first of all, whenever you do this, you have to do something that has reality base to it.
Oh.
And make sure the other person's dreaming it too. Yeah.
Well, first you get $1,000, and then this can happen. Okay.
Gonna start there.
Hardy couldn't believe that he was going to play in the NBA or play for the Lakers. You know, I mean, you know what I'm saying, that kind of stuff. But you have to have the skills. The reality is there. When I came out to the West Coast, when the comedy team had split up, I couldn't get on at the Comedy Store. It took me a month. I ended up sleeping in an old Nash Rambler. I was house sitting, and I couldn't do that anymore. Now it's not my car. It was a car that was in the alley up on blocks. The front seat came down. I got a wife and 3 kids in Chicago. I'm sleeping in that abandoned car, still trying to get on at the Comedy Store. Mitchie hadn't seen me yet.
Wow.
When I was laying in that car at night, I would envision Johnny Carson talking to me saying, "You're a funny guy, Tom DREESEN. You're a funny guy." I would see it, I'd feel it, and I'd believe it. I'd see myself, what I was wearing, and Johnny saying, "You're a funny guy, Tom DREESEN." Knowing if I was sitting down talking to Johnny, in regards to what you and I were talking about earlier, if I was sitting down talking to Johnny, you know, I had already succeeded over there in stand-up. So that's what I would envision. But you see that picture behind me? That's a picture I show to classes when I go. That's the picture I image in my mind when I was sleeping in the abandoned car. Nothing can become a reality unless it's thought first.
Well, you know, Tom, I was going to say, I saw that you would be a great guest. I believed you'd be a great guest. And the reality has been that you were a great guest. So we want to thank you for coming out and doing this for us, man. So yeah.
Seriously, what an honor, Tom. You're amazing. You've kind of been a mentor. I've watched your set. There's very few of us that are still clean comics anymore. There's very few. And I just always marvel. To me, it takes harder work to be clean and be great. And I'm just so proud of everything you've done. And thank you for doing our show.
Yeah, and folks, you can find Tom at tomdreesen.com. And make sure you hire him for all sorts of things.
And mention his book. You got to read his book. It's amazing.
Yeah, what's
Tom,
the book?
tell us your book.
I just wrote a book called Still Standing. It's a double entendre because I've been knocked down physically a lot in my life, but I kept getting back up, and and then of course I'm still a stand-up comedian. So it's called Still Standing, and the subtitle is My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. It can be gotten on Amazon or at Barnes and Noble. It's got over 250 5-star reviews on Amazon now. I'm very
wow.
I don't mean to be bragging, but it's my life's work, and it's a triumphant book. And I people who read it tell me that they leave feeling triumphant, and they feel like they too can overcome whatever difficulties are there in their life. You know.
Awesome. Well, I feel triumphant having gotten to have you on for so much of our time, and but we got to get going, unfortunately. Once again, thanks to Tom DREESEN and my co-hosts Ron Pearson And Todd Turner. Until next time, I'm Carl Kozlowski. You've been listening to Dream Up on KABF 88.3 FM. Thank you, KABF. Good night.
Tom, spectacular, man. Thank you so much.
Hey, Todd, nice to meet you. Carl, nice to see you again. And